It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting. It's interesting.
Welcome to It's So Interesting, where people talk about their work and life experience. I am George Spitzer. Today I'm talking with John Sant'Ambrogio, who is a cellist. Okay, let's get right to it. I'd like to go into an area that I know you're passionate about, which is, of course, the future of orchestral music, particularly if played in this country. It's a function of a broken business model as well as a dwindling audience that appreciates the music.
I do feel that this, for us to succeed, for classical music to succeed, we're going to have to evolve often in presentation, primarily in presentation. And that involves a lot of different things. As we know, early music often was played in a very small auditorium or beautiful dining room or wherever it was in a palace. The acoustics were great. You were close to the artist. Today, you have huge auditoriums. And if you've got something like 3,000 people, which often is what some of them do, it's hard to get young people excited about it to come and be there. Now, wait a second. How about rock stars and all those other things? They get 5,000, 10,000 people coming. What are you talking about, John? Well, let's look what they do differently. One is amplification. Am I saying we have to amplify the orchestra? Not sure, but sometimes that works. And another is visual. Every one of these rock, country, western, they have big screens up there where you see the individuals close. So if you're sitting back a half a mile in the auditorium, it's like you're right next to the guy or girl who's playing. And this makes a huge difference. There's other aspects of visual that are so important, like pictures that go along with what the music is doing at the time. We've just recently been involved in a concert where one of the titles of the concert was Sorrow and Joy. And they had all these incredible pictures. For instance, one of the popular songs was The Walls of Jericho, and coming down. And, well, they had the painting up at joint. And then they showed other walls, the Berlin Wall coming down. Then they showed Martin Luther King, etc. Then sorrow. They showed pictures of the Depression and people so sad. And then they showed pictures and pictures crying of the people. And then the joy of the nature and the joy of people succeeding. And it was just a great combination. The people loved it.
Doesn't that conflict with the way many people have been trained to listen to music, particularly in classical, where the picture's in your mind and you're listening through the idea?
Yes, it does conflict, but I'm rather mature. I lean towards that we've got to evolve. And, for instance, at the same time, we can say that, it should be this way, but we're losing audiences. And we can also look at the movies, and everybody, whatever age they are, they love movies. Take away the music, they're not going to like it. It's not going to be. The music adds so much. And as I said, it's always in a way been that way. When you have the music, often the composers wrote for special occasions. Handel and Handel's Messiah, or the Four Seasons. Wow, it's incredibly descriptive. Why would you then not allow them to have some pictures of winter, or summer, or spring, or fall? What would that deter you from really getting the meaning? No, I don't think so. So I lean on the side we must evolve. I also feel that we've got to make the event more than just going to a concert hall, parking in the garage before you get in. You go to the concert hall, you hear the music, you come out, and you go home. I think we've got to have other things in there. One is food, and good food. Possibility of having a dining room, and good dining room restaurants, and intermission, good food with a lot of concert halls do that now. Not many have restaurants. And I also feel that art, I think lobbies, why not have the lobbies where they come out at intermission and they can see great art. It can be local art, but all over. And so it's a double experience. You don't like art? How many people don't like art? Most people do. And most people that like music are going to like art. So I feel that however you want to do it, we have to evolve. We have to bring in other things that are going to, we have to overcome the problem with there being too big a space. That can be done by visual, etc. Sometimes amplification. Wow, I mean, so many classical musicians would say, no. I think also programming is very, very important, but that's very hard because it's very hard to know who's going to be popular 50 to 100 years from now. So I think the masterpieces are important, but sometimes themes are important. And some people like John Williams, who I just think is wonderful, that music that a lot of young people are hearing should be there. And in classical music, this is not so much for the orchestra, though it can be done. I feel in smaller ensembles, etc., crossover music, that is doing right next to a classical Mozart sonata. I have a series where I combine Broadway shows with classical string quartets, and like I do the first movement of the Sunrise Quartet by Haydn, and then right after that I do Sunrise Sunset. I think that's from the Fiddler Roof. The people love it. They don't feel that they've been cheated by hearing something that's different. And you have to find great arrangers. I found a wonderful arranger, Matt Naughton, who has just done arrangements for the Broadway shows that are just absolutely fantastic, and we put them right next to each other, and they just love it.
You are technically retired, that is, from the union job at the orchestra that you've played in for 37 years. You made a full living with it. You raised a family. Is that still possible today, or do you feel there's going to be doom in the picture? Will orchestras function where you have to pay 100 musicians at union scale, partially through ticket sales and the rest by fundraising, and the whole network of the society that supports it, because it's the gem or the star of culture in a city, when the education that would support that, by the time the citizens become in their 50s and 60s and have the money, aren't there?
Well, that's a prophecy that is really not too pleasant, but it could go either way. I feel that ultimately classical music will endure, but we are in a bunch of challenges when you have imaginative and brilliant executive directors and conductors who will listen and come up with ideas. I think you will survive. I think they will survive. It may be a very, very difficult time. And, we don't even know how is our economy going to work at this present time in this year. I lean towards the opinion that we will never fail completely, but we will be challenged. We have been challenged actually before, too. We may be even challenged more.
Well, when you were with the St. Louis Symphony, at the time you accepted the post as first chair, about 40 plus years ago, at that time almost no one had heard of the St. Louis Symphony. It was not in the top 3 or 5 orchestras of the country. It became one of the top 3 all because of you?
No, not me. No, became because there was an attitude. I think Leonard Slatkin did so much because he really supported the 10 different judges. There were 10 of us who made the decision about who got in the orchestra. Leonard was just great at doing that, and I thought he brought to St. Louis. Also, the St. Louis Symphony got a reputation for being very fair in its audition process. And the orchestra built up and got tremendous players. And as I've mentioned. Time magazine at one point put us as number 2 in the whole country after the Chicago Symphony. Who knows if any of that is accurate, but we really came out from that. The St. Louis Symphony, as all orchestras, I mean, I think last year the Philadelphia Orchestra declared bankruptcy. We're talking that a lot of the orchestras have gone through tremendous thing, and they have to adapt, they have to evolve, they have to think about Starbucks and their approach, have desserts. In other words, we're in a different era. It's still, the music has never changed. The value of music, film, television, news, documentaries, all have music. They must have figured something. At first, they didn't, but they do now. So the music is there. We just have to figure out how to fit into that team. Let's move into the lineup.
Which brings up an interesting idea. The European model of orchestras and operas essentially is state-supported. It's funded by the state.
I think it is.
Largely. Whereas in the United States, it's the other way around.
Right.
More and more, there's less government money involved. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it's zero government money involved. And yet, the music is great in both locations, or both parts of the world. Is there an advantage to having to prove your existence every year financially versus being, like in Germany, the state's ops are just being funded?
That's an incredible question. It's so hard to answer. I am struck on tours when I went to those European countries. I was just struck by the way the people, supported the music. A lot of it is that their cultural approach is slightly different. Now, there's something else here, and I don't know if there's any validity in what I'm about to say. But middle class, besides the upper class, certainly the upper middle class, have been very supportive of music. And in a lot of the countries in Europe, there still is a middle class right now. We're a little bit challenged here with our culture, et cetera. Our middle class seems to be growing smaller and smaller every year. And then so a lot of it is just on, the support from the upper class, the high-end people. And I don't know. And sometimes they used to be very supportive of music. It's like I'm arguing that morality is somehow connected with this, but I do feel the arts are very important for our morality in our country. If we don't have a middle class that can go and attend these concerts, just the other day, we were giving a concert. I said to my friend, "Oh, are you coming?" And my friend said, "My son and his girlfriend are going to be here this weekend, and that would be $75. So I bought the tickets for them. And they just were so appreciative. But my point here is this person was not greedy or anything, but this person was being very challenged economically, financially, working hard, but didn't have $75 to go. So I was thinking that, gosh, I wish that when you bought a ticket that, yes, your initial question was, I think we'll survive. But it's tough. It's certainly tough now. In my book, I tell about 3 orchestras that are really making it. And St. Louis is one of them. That a lot of orchestras are losing money left and right. Inflation has pushed up what men and women have to ask for salaries from an orchestra. When I started in the Boston Symphony, it was $9,000 a year I was making in one of the greatest orchestras in the world. That was my salary. And that did well with that $9,000. Now I think it's close to $100,000 that they have to be paid. Don't you think there's inflation? And I think we may still have it coming in the future. And I'm hoping that we will learn how to cope with it.
Well, many orchestras in the United States were making it financially and able to pay those salaries because they had recording contracts with record labels. Now, with the advent of the internet and iPod and iPad and everything else, most of this music is free because it's been ripped, which makes it impossible to have a recording contract. Is this a case where the technology is killing a medium, or is it a challenge to have the medium done in a different way?
Well, I think, another incredible question, and when you asked it, you inspired me to think about something that should be done. A think tank should be created of wonderful thinkers from all over the country, from all these different fields, to decide how to use technology to their advantage. That's why I say evolving, you have to evolve. It just doesn't work if you don't. And, I just think that, yes, I think that in one respect, technology has hurt. I have a nice little pension. I've got a couple of pensions because I grew up in a time when that was working. And one of them is recording. But there's no recording pensions now because they're not recording. Orchestras are not recording. Orchestras are not touring like they used to. Well, China orchestra's coming here, I noticed, but it's not often. A friend of mine, Gary Sheldon, he went last year to China with the ballet, but they didn't take the orchestra with him. And they had to use a local Chinese orchestra. A lot of things. It has become, very, very expensive to do these things, and so things have to be thought out again. And I think a think tank that would just start exploring all the possibilities, it would wake people up, because what happens when, let's say, most of the time when a new executive director comes into any arts organization, he's thinking about the way it's been done for years.
And survival.
Right. But now, a couple of these executive directors who are coming in are rethinking. You have to rethink.
I want to go into an area about the music itself. My question has to do with repertory. We have many people in the younger generations talking about white dead men music. The great composers that we all grew up with are inspired with the beautiful sound, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, moving up to more contemporary times, Rachmaninoff, Bartók. But when we come up into the 20th century, generally speaking, the audiences are not interested. They wouldn't be able to sell out a concert hall if it was just, quote, modern music. Is there a reason why, quote, modern, unquote, music is not as palatable as the greats were?
Whatever I say would be my personal opinion. And, I'm not certain, but I tell this story of when I was in the Boston Symphony. Schoenberg had now shifted over to 12-tone music, which was the rage. Today, nobody listens to it. It's hard to always determine what is good music. Two, these are factors that are involved. We love country music, Western music. We like jazz. We like blues. We like this. They're all music. And we think traditionally that music should, if we're serious music, we should only be having music that's, with a symphony orchestra, et cetera, et cetera. So there is one of your problems. These two kinds of institutions, something where there'd be 6 people playing with a drummer and a trumpet player, or listen to a whole big orchestra. Which is better? Well, you probably if you had a vote and you just took people off the street, the majority would go with country western or jazz or whatever that might be. Does that mean that the classical music that's being composed today is not as good, or what's happening? Again, I would say that they are very different and they can convey different things. And I feel that classical composers have to convey something other than just dissonance, extreme horror or whatever. There still has to be beauty there. And they do it most of the time very effectively in the film. And I would argue, but as I say, John Williams to me is great. It's like saying, which is better? Which do I like? The people would answer, no, I like popular music more. Well, they aren't taking into consideration how they love film and film music. They just don't think about that because they're watching the film. They're not saying, oh, now what did he do with this chord here, or how's that orchestra? They don't think about that. So their answer is not accurate. How do we, as musicians, how do we adjust to that? That's a good question. That's why I say I think we need a think tank. But we have to, show people And just recently, I went to a symphony concert at my old orchestra, which I love, and they did a whole program of John Williams' music. It was packed. It was packed more than any other concert. Well, that was a symphony orchestra. That was not a jazz band playing music. So this is something I think we really have to consider, and the think tank would have to figure out how to do it. You can't force things. It's subtle. You have to learn. Things are evolving, just as we are learning that people are reading books on Kindle, etc., as opposed to buying all these books. And I think we're slowly learning the importance of that. We're going to have to learn that in the arts, too. Arts will never die. They're wonderful. But, you see pictures on the computer. You can see wonderful things. So we have, as I said, I don't know the answers, but I do feel that if we had brilliant people like you who would get together and really analyze the different things rather than just doing it as we have done before. And ultimately, those answers will come. But let's say you have 100 orchestras or 100 institutions in the country. There will be 3 or 4 people who will move 3 or 4 organizations to evolve and to adapt. The others might take a longer time, and when they fail, they'll think twice about it.
I've been talking with John Sant'Ambrogio. Thank you for being here, John.
Oh, my pleasure.
If you would like to contact John or to listen again to this show or any other show, go to itssointeresting.com.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
So
It's so
interesting.
interesting.
It's interesting.